In fact, that the point that he's gone to Russia is it's tragic, really, that he's gone to Russia. We know that we know about Putin's regime. We know it's an appalling illiberal regime, and there's nothing that Putin would like more than to harbour somebody like Edward Snowden, who's revealed illiberal activities in the West, to counter the view that he is, the very widely held view that he's a dictator. So we've fallen into the trap in many ways, and what we were trying to do in the European Parliament was send a very strong message about where the home of liberty and where the home of those people who look after individual rights really is, to try and get rid of some of the damage that's been done by the fact that he's had to go to Russia of all places to get asylum. And that is absolutely tragic that's occurred, and that is the only safe place for somebody who's trying to escape his fate.
Okay, quickly, Michael Morton, I'd like to move on a little bit.
No, please do. I spent 2 years of my career working in the European Parliament, and the Parliament is a positive institution. I believe in it. I think it's necessary. I'm not a hardcore Eurosceptic. But Andrew, I don't believe it's by any stretch of the imagination that the European Parliament is motivated purely by noble ideals. I think there's a very strong vein of anti-Americanism in the European Parliament, based on my own perception, my own experience. Mm. And I think a lot of the resolutions, which are non-legislative, they don't count, they're just political gestures, are frankly about sticking two fingers in the eye of the United States.
And on occasions, that is warranted. That's not. It's anti-Americanism. Anti-Americanism might be about what America does, and America doesn't always do the right thing. And it is perfectly legitimate for the European Parliament to occasionally say those things, isn't it?
Yes, but I look at the people who are leading the charge, and they were people, I think here of Ioana Miculescu, who was a former Securitate agent in the Romanian dictatorship. They're not, I promise you, I don't think anyway, that they're noble people. I think they're very virulently aggressive people who, in another life, in another context, might burn the American flag. I don't think they're motivated by personal idealism, that's for sure.
Well, the burning the American flag, there's worse things that you can do. But I've been thinking...
It's actually very bad for the environment to burn the American flag, because all the flame retardants...
It depends whether it's from biodiverse substances.
Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit to data protection and the control that citizens have over data about them. The European Parliament recently passed much stronger data protection regulation. Would the panel agree that it's right to insist on greater data protection for European citizens?
Yes.
Michael Naughton, you seem like you've got an answer ready, so who'd like to start?
Hopefully not a monosyllabic answer. I go on to a point I made earlier on in the night. You must be careful. Please don't misinterpret this, because it's not intended as a prejudice line. But I'm very much aware of my status as a white, English-speaking, heterosexual male. It's incredibly easy to be me, to be all of us. Look at the room, in fact. None of us are likely in Western society in the 21st century to face persecution. But having seen what happens to my gay friends, to my Arabic friends and the wider Arabic community in Paris, there are people who are subject to persecution. And one of the reasons I joined the Conservative Party, I used to be a little more centrist, indeed centre-left when I was much younger, was the Identity Card Bill. I thought that was a monstrous idea. The idea that you can have data given to the state to facilitate potential persecution, I think, is awful. So yes, people should insist on the strongest data protection laws, although perhaps not the right to be forgotten, although we'll come on to that later.
Yeah, we definitely will.
Yeah, since we mentioned identity cards, then I was a supporter of No to ID, and I think there's nothing more dangerous than giving the state the right to actually give you your identity. If they can give you an identity, they can take it away as well. And so I would be absolutely opposed to anything like that. And I'd also like to point out, with regards to the protection of your own digital information and so on, there has been a lot of thought about this with regards to operating systems and so on, to give since we have a more technical audience. And so I would actually say something like the capability-based operating systems that have been made in the past, where you have the right to have access to information, and you have a key that you handed out. And I think that is the issue that we really need. We need to do the same sort of thing. Rather than have a hierarchical system with who can get to see the information, The information should actually be held by you, and you should be able to give out the right to organisations to see the information, so it's in your control. And that's where encryption can come in, which is another reason why I support encryption rights.
Okay. Well, yes, and I guess one of the issues that we're all concerned about at the moment, or at least should be concerned about, is the sale of data. The fact that data on us as individuals, which is held by government agencies, there's the potential that might be something that's somehow saleable in future to other bodies and to the private sector, as the private sector gets more and more involved in the public, in what is public sector organisations such as the NHS. So that's a concern, and I think one of the things we've got to do with government and data is have some sort of very strong ruling regarding our own data and what it is and shouldn't be revealed, and to whom.
Okay, Johnson.
Yeah, I largely agree with what's been said. I'll just add one angle I thought Andrew was going to raise actually, which is we do have a stronger data protection culture in Europe than there is in the United States, and the difference is quite stark. Now, we are currently negotiating a treaty with the United States called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Pact, or Partnership, which Andrew was speaking against at length at the previous Hustings. Oh, good. But I want to say I think it's a hugely important treaty. It should increase the British economy and the European economy by a significant number of percent if it goes through increased trade in services. However, I don't doubt that data protection will be one of the issues that will be a source of friction, because the Americans will say, well, we have these business practices that involve, fairly casual use of people's data, and you're blocking our businesses by having strong data protection laws over there, and that's something we want you to back down on. And Europe will say back, this is something we want you to back down on, you're not treating us as citizens with sufficient respect. And I just wanted to raise that now, and I will say, if you want to add a political point to that, is we're in a much stronger position in that argument, being part of the EU and negotiating this trade agreement with America as the EU, than we would be if we were outside the EU and negotiating our own free trade agreement with the UK, with the US, as simply as the UK being so much smaller and therefore having less leverage in that negotiation.
But we're in a stronger position by not actually signing the TTIP in the first place. Yes, that would make a lot more sense. Then you don't say, well, we won't give as many rights away if we sign the TTIP. Well, let's not give any away.
Just to make a quick point about open societies there, we aren't actually allowed to know the details of what has been negotiated on our behalf. And as far as I'm concerned, that just rings alarm bells. We should not have a situation where our rights have been negotiated away and we don't even know what they're saying and what they're doing.
Yeah. It is a Green Party MEP who's been a whistleblower on the investor-state dispute settlement part of the TTIP.
Yeah. And they come on to transparency of lawmaking and the European Union in a second. So, so Michael Naughton, you mentioned earlier on the right to be forgotten. I think I personally would call that the right to delete. So the right to ask companies, private companies, to delete data about you when you request it, as opposed to the right to have everything about you on the internet removed, which is not possible in things like search engines, for example. That's very, very difficult to do. Where does the panel stand on citizens' right to delete data about them that's held by private companies? Sure.
Right, by private companies, and I think you've answered almost for me, really. For any private sector organisation, I think there should be a complete and total right to delete one's data. You talked about deleting oneself from the internet. Mm-hmm. That is practically impossible. Mm. I think any private sector organisation, any profit-making organisation, indeed any charity, shouldn't have a right to hold one's data if one doesn't wish it to be held. I would draw the line at the state, however. I think there is an argument, I'm thinking here of my own daughter's images of child abuse, for example. I would not want the state to be unable to track paedophiles around the internet, especially on the deep internet, because of a right to be forgotten.
Okay.
I think you should have a right to see, ultimate right to see whatever information any organisation holds on you to verify its accuracy, if nothing else. And if you dispute any of that, then you should have the right to actually insist it's deleted if it's not true. The comment about so like child pornography has just been brought up. There seems to be the standard bugbear that gets used against free access to the internet, and quite frankly, it's just a scare story used by governments as an excuse to control and shut down a free internet. And so, as a general rule, no, sorry, I really object to using such a term, because that is a serious issue, and constantly sort of like suggesting that anybody who objects to the internet being walled off and monitored and secured by the government for our safety, so it must therefore be a supporter of the users of child pornography. I'm sorry, it's unfair and it's unacceptable.
There's no such thing as complete freedom. The liberty without any sort of restriction is license, and surely you wouldn't be in favour of that.
I would argue in favour as far as possible in freedom as it is possible to get. There is such a thing as the golden rule, which is that you are free to do anything that you wish that does not interfere with other people's rights to their complete freedom as well. And I am a supporter of the golden rule.
Yes, I had a religious studies teacher once upon a time who said, my right to swing my arms ends where your nose begins.
Stops 1 millimetre before your nose, yes, I know.
Yes, so I think we agree, actually.
Josh, where do you stand on the right to delete data?
I think I agree with this chap. Certainly, I think you have a
Do you need me to introduce the panel?
Yes, yeah. Terrible.
David Wildgoose.
David Wildgoose, that's right, yes. So a right to inspect the data held about you and to correct it if it's wrong. I'm open to persuasion on the right to be forgotten or the right to have stuff deleted. But I certainly wouldn't commit to it at this point. I think we're in danger of saying, okay, and there's a problem with information being seen entirely as the property of the person the information is about, because information is slightly broader than that, almost always in practice. And so there is, the things that are in my head are actually, the ideas in my head are my property, and not even if they're about you.
So your problem.
So I think I support where this is coming from, but I think, I'm open to persuasion, but I'm certainly not committing to a completely information belongs to the person it's about position.
Does anyone?
Well, I'll come back as well. I mean, I guess.
Sorry, Andrew. I was going to see if anyone from the audience had a.
Well, I was just want to respond to the point, but the point was really about private companies. Now, the big issue is that the private and the public are getting mixed up. We have private companies which can now access the National Health Service and are now operating in the National Health Service, who will have access to data at that point. And so I guess it becomes very difficult to sort of sometimes to unravel who has got what and what rights those people have to that information and what they can do with it. And I think particularly when we're opening up or outsourcing public services to private organisations, we've really got to be very careful about what that means in terms of the data on individuals that we have. Now, you'll see there's a lot of councils at the moment which are, because of the huge cuts which are coming to council departments, which are outsourcing their services to private organisations. You've got Suffolk County Council, which has practically got every service which goes out to the private sector as a direct result of appalling coalition government policies. Let's get a...
I thought this was about civil rights.
Well, it is.
About privatisation.
It is exactly about civil rights, because privatisation...
Just talking about privatisation.
Well, if you'll just listen.
Yeah?
But if you're looking at the privatisation of services, that means more and more public data is going to go into private hands, and that causes problems in this arena.
I think these rights surely apply whether the data is public or private, then. Do they not?
Just make a quick point, because one of the issues there, of course, with NHS data and so on, is if that gets in the hands of insurance companies, you can find people who are suddenly no longer able to afford insurance, certain kinds of insurance, simply because of their data has been leaked to those companies. And so you're actually removing people's rights in a way by actually handing over information that should be private to them, that they would prefer to be controlled, medical confidentiality.
Mark?
Just on the subject of the NHS data, they show you rather aware of the issue of GP data, hospital data being given to private companies, government being very secretive about exactly how we're doing this. It turned out that how we're doing what they said we would do. They said they wouldn't be GP data away, but they would be hospital data away. So, in Europe, should we have mandated states, should we have mandated opt-in or opt-out? It's a state that is shared data by companies. Should the EU have policy on what level of opt-out or opt-in
No.
is necessary?
Okay, so should the EU mandate that member states offer an opt-in or opt-out of whether data held by those member states can be shared to private companies?
No, this is not the role of the EU. This is, again, a very social choice. Social policy is most appropriately exercised at the national level. If we want to change, if we want to go closer to liberty or closer to security, we can do so by voting in different governments. We can vote in a Conservative government, a Labour government, if only they turned up, a Green government, perhaps once upon a time, actually. You might be the first Green PM. But we can do this at the national level through our rights at the ballot box. Once we make something once we put something at the European level, it becomes constitutional law. We cannot change our own laws unless we can get 27 other member states to agree. And that in practice has proven to be very difficult over the last 60 years. So there might be an argument for or against doing this at the national level, but your question was, should the EU have a role? No, it shouldn't.
Can I just say I agree with that?
However, like we've heard earlier on, the EU can make statements in terms of the things that the EU regards as important through the European Parliament. Now, those will not be binding at all on national governments, and you may regard them as posturing, but it can be done. So that can actually ramp up the debate. And so we might very well have a debate in this country about this, which could then go on to the European Parliament, but then could influence the debate in other countries. And so there is a role there for politicians to actually take a lead, because ultimately that's what you're wanting us to do, to raise the debate and try and spread the benefits of liberty further.
Best way to
Joe Otten.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to raise concerns about the NHS data. I mean, that just first out. And you're quite right that there's been a big, as these things are, debate about the release of pseudonymised data. And it turns out that it was another database that had already been released, and I think quite rightly concerned that it wasn't sufficiently anonymous and it's not clear where it had gone. So you're quite right to do that. I just think not as a point of principle, but as a practical measure, you're not going to succeed in changing that sort of thing, opposing that sort of measure by saying Europe should legislate to stop national governments doing the wrong thing. I don't think that's going to work. The whole talk, certainly in this country, is we want Europe to do less and not more. And whether you agree with that or whether you don't, I think we're not going to. I think getting sufficient agreement around Europe to say let's have another role for Europe in terms of regulating health services or something. Yeah, it's such a minefield. Nobody likes change to the way the health services are run. And people say, I don't want Europe taking over my health services. Don't go there. And so I suggest don't go there. Fight it in this country and try and get it changed and try and get it. Again, it's a failure to understand the statistics of it, and what pseudonymisation actually means. I think at the right level, at the policy level, has been the problem here.
I think it's a competition of ideas, which is the reason why you actually need different approaches to all these matters, so that people can actually identify what the best ideas are. And that would actually require not have a homogenised mishmash compromise that is what you get at Europe. So absolutely in favour of a national solution.
So no single market for data?
No.
Yes.
So I'm listening to what you're saying about, particularly if you just talk about the right to read. And the word basic stance that we have about the right to delete data. To delete data is essentially the same word, but it seems to be generally in favour of that to an extent or not. In practical terms, making that implemented, how far will you go to support the practical deletability mindset had to be forgotten, means additional costs for businesses, for instance, and increased bureaucracy and administration for larger organisations. How far will you go to say that, to enforce that?
Andrew Cooper?
I guess the thing that springs to mind when you said what you did was the Millennium Bug, if you remember that. The Millennium Bug, which was going to make all sorts of planes fall out of the sky, all sorts of appalling things were going to happen at the Millennium when it went from 99 to 00. And but there was an awful lot of preparation that was done for that in terms of there was a set period of time. People recognised what the issue was, and as they were gearing up to that time, plans were put in place to deal with it, and it was addressed. So I think if you're actually going to put something like this in place, there needs to be a timetable where people are involved in that. People who are producing software for the companies use will have upgrades and new versions which will be compatible and make it easier to actually deal with deletion as an issue, because it becomes, like you say, it becomes a part of their business. And so if it becomes part of their business and it becomes part of a cost, then those companies will then have an interest in actually trying to find easy ways of making newer versions of that software, which makes it less. So I think the important thing for what you're talking about is a realistic timetable, a plan to do it, and to enable those things to happen so it can be done cost effectively.
And you stand for legislating that there is a timetable put in place that by, let's say, 2018, that's enough time for companies of certain size to be able to have in place a plan and upgrade and change to their online systems to ensure that.
Yeah, because we've got to find, we do have to have a plan. And if we do believe that it's an important thing to do, we have to have a plan, we have to have a timetable, and I have to turn my mobile phone off, which is making me noise. But that's what we need. If it's something that we believe, then you've got a plan for it.
I don't think you can be too sweeping on this. For example, businesses are required by law to keep 6 years with the tax records. If they've sold you some goods, then they have to be a record of the fact they've sold you those goods. Plus, of course, data can be stored on backup tapes, and it's not realistic to actually insist that somebody goes through all their backup tapes and actually remove them, which is why I think a hard and fast deletion rule is too extreme. The ability to actually see the data that is held, correct it, and remove it from that point onwards is what I would support, not a hard and fast all records. I don't think that would be reasonable.
Okay. Any further comment?
Not really. Well, I said I wasn't fully persuaded, so I'm not planning any legislation.
That's fine.
I think we're at the point in the question where everything has been said, but not quite by everyone. I don't know how up to speed you are if you follow the Brussels bubble at all. The most recent data protection directive dates from 1995, written largely in a pre-internet era. Funnily enough, we're currently drafting another one right now. Right now, the Parliament is scheduled to vote on it, hopefully before the mandate, well, actually the ship sail, what am I saying, we're 2 weeks before. My speech is 2 weeks out of date. There wasn't a date put on it. You mentioned 2018. I suspect that might be a little too fast, because if Parliament adopts a position and the national governments and the Council of Ministers also have to adopt a position, they then have to come together to get an agreed EU position, and I suspect this wouldn't be done in 4 years. So I think David Wildgoose made a series of points, all of which I would agree with, so I won't repeat them. I wouldn't put a date on it at this point.
But didn't you say it was a national decision?
No, I think
there's something like this.
We're talking about the right to delete one's data among private sector companies.
Okay.
We're talking about different issue.
Okay, I'm going to move it on to copyright. The European Commission has recently completed a public consultation on the future of copyright. How can we make sure that copyright stays up to date with the way that we use technology?
Yeah. Again, I refer to what I said earlier about how you do things without technology and how you do things with technology, and can we kind of treat them in a consistent and comparable way? And so I'll just make the point that if we didn't have public libraries today, and a council or government tried to introduce them, the publishers will be up in arms saying this is terrible. You can't have people reading our books for free. You'll make all the authors will starve. And So I'm concerned that we understand that's not a good argument when it comes to books, but we don't understand it when it comes to all the other kinds of intellectual property around. Now, I will listen. I always listen to the creatives, the artists, and so on, who say, "Well, I do need to find a way to make money doing this," because they absolutely do. But I'm highly sceptical, I've got to say, of the companies that kind of own the rights to IP but aren't involved in the creative process, and the influence they have over the regulation of the technology, because digital rights management and all that, if I bought something, I should be able to watch it on any device. I should be able to watch it any time when I want, because I've paid for that, as I could read a book at any time, etc., etc.
Right, I want to step out of my role as pantomime baddie for a second. I want to say something completely pro-European, and I'm aware that the video camera is running, so I'll see myself on YouTube being pilloried tomorrow on Conservative Health. I think one of the greatest steps forward we've had in recent years in the single market has been the introduction of a single European patent court. And a classic European fudge, unfortunately, the court itself has had to be split between 3 European cities, one of which is London. Nevertheless, this is absolutely fantastic. As a Conservative, I believe in pro-business legislation. I think it's the best way to raise people out of poverty. I think a strong economy leads to richer, happier citizens. Happiness. Well, let's say it's easier to cry in a Mercedes than on a bike. This point that's just been made about intellectual property. How fast are we going? Well, I think we're not completely inadequate. Ed, I detect a little bit of skepticism in your question, because you seem to imply that what we currently have is not up to Wilmot Passminster. I think we're almost there, I think a single European patent court, single protection for intellectual property, doing one registration procedure instead of 28, I think is good. I think it is good enough.
Okay.
I'm completely opposed.
Okay.
Completely opposed to the use of patent law in this fashion. I'm a computer programmer, and examples of the kind of stupid patents that have been granted in the past is, for example, the order which you evaluate cells in a spreadsheet. And this is which Microsoft got. And it is absolutely ludicrous. It is all about shutting down competition. And the original idea of patents and copyrights was to actually enable ideas to be put into the public domain, having given a short period of time for their creator to actually profit from the idea in the first place. But the idea was they had that protection for a limited period of time, and then it was a public property for all to benefit from. Whereas what we have now, we have an increasing extension to the amount of copyright. I mean, the DMCA was known as the Mickey Mouse Copyright Act, I believe, because it's all about continuing the copyright of Mickey Mouse. And you have the situation where the European law has actually acted to extend copyright in many countries, not reduce it, thereby keeping what should by now be public goods out of the public hands for even longer periods of time, just for the benefit, as you say, of businesses, but in a fashion completely contrary to the principle of copyrights and patents as they were originally envisaged. So I'm sorry, I'm utterly opposed to what you're saying.
Do you think any company should be able to use the image of Mickey Mouse? Just so I understand.
Yes, because it's now it is outside of its copyright. It's well outside its copyright. And the whole point of the idea of copyright was that you were allowed to profit from it for a set period of time, after which it became public domain. So yes.
Copyright, there are, when you look at some software and some of the issues with it, then patents, things that are patented are sort of things which should necessarily be common anyway, and so there are issues there where things are not original, things have not been created in that way, and so that's an issue. Generally, if something is genuinely original, if something's genuinely being created, then perhaps that's an area where you might want to look at something that's copyrighted or patented.
Mm-hmm. Okay, does anyone from the audience have a question they'd like to ask on the subject of copyright or patents? Yeah.
We can't quite
So
hear you,
could you speak up, please?
Yeah.
would set the level of the royalty? Would that not be the role of the market, perhaps? A government-enforced royalty? No?